Championships that I remember that were amazing, that actually are my favorite part of wearing, were the long ones that we took. You know, the one I remember was that trip where we broke down in the bus. We broke down in Texas and were there for 5 weeks waiting for the bus to get fixed. And the whole trip itself from Rockport actually to San Francisco and back took 3 months. 3 months. We all got on this bus, we threw our bikes on top of the bus, and off we were. You know, my parents took all these kids for 3 months, and we had such a good time. And it's probably, not only it probably isn't my favorite experience of wearing, but it's probably like my favorite life experience. If I could just pick like one time in my life that I would want to hold on to and forget about everything else, it would be that.
A new passion. I feel like I've discovered all of my passions there. Sort of high school and that sort of time of life is when you discover who you are.
So, weird story. I had been homeschooled as a kid from about 2nd grade through 5th or 6th, and then started getting really buggy and really wanting to leave. But Waring was one of the schools on the list, and I had one of those sort of day-long immersion things. Weird kids like me, and they do weird art things, and I like weird art things, so that sounds pretty good. Visiting the school now, it looks very modern and very, nicely set up. Back when I was there, when I started in 7th grade, it was really it wasn't run down, but it was definitely a little bit more ramshackle. It was a little bit more sprawling.
The time I wanted to leave Waring the most was honestly when I first got there, because I'd been ripped from my group of friends and a situation that I was comfortable with at a pretty young age. So, like, I'd say the first few months I was at Waring, it was just like, what am I doing here? Like, there's this weird little place. They only speak French. My class is so small. I didn't really know what was going on. Couldn't, like, wrap my head around, like, how cool it was, what they were doing there at the time.
I mean, I love the insanity of Philip and Jose. There was a day I remember extremely distinctly. It must have been 84 when Philip got together and said, basically, I'm closing the school down because we don't have a good sense of community anymore, and that's all I care about.
She would regularly, like, make a bunch of crepes on that thing. She'd fire it up and make crepes for the whole school. I don't know how she did it, but she'd have all her frying pans going and everything, or she'd like bake bread in there for the whole school.
I don't know if it was the Smicks or the Waring's snake that they used to, he used to like get warmed up in the oven, and someone cooked him once because they didn't know that there was a snake in the oven because they like to like be in there to get warm, and like someone like turned the oven on to preheat it, and they ended up cooking the snake. That's one myth.
Yeah. Actually, the story that I remember about your dad on a trip, we would often go to Boston. He would drive a van into Boston, and we'd go to the theater, or we'd go to some musical performance, or we'd go to something. And what I really remember is when he would take either Rocinante or the van, and he would drive and read out loud to us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Yep.
He got something
Driving.
open on the steering wheel
Oh,
while
yeah.
he was driving.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, nice big steering wheel so he can put the book right out there.
Yep.
Oh my
Oh, yeah.
Moby Dick or the New York Times or something.
Something.
A cup of coffee.
Yep.
But he did this the whole way to California too. And we did this every time he drove. It was like incredible, really.
I don't know why this one popped in my head too. There was this kid named Aaron Marsh in our class who you guys definitely don't know, and he was a real odd duck. And he once fastened his belt to the flagpole on the Waring campus and tried to actually scale the flagpole and get to the top until he was stopped by some of the faculty members.
Favorite Waring myths. When they built the forum, we all had to go into the woods and hug the trees. And I remember they knocked down the goat shed. That was a really big deal. Like, I always preferred having meetings.
I mean, the other totally crazy days were when Philip would say, the teachers aren't coming to school together because there are no teachers here, we're all learners, so just teach yourself.
I feel like when I was there, it was almost like you went to camp. Like, it had like a very camp feel.
I was an Army aviator. I flew helicopters, the OH-58 Delta Kiowa Warrior. I deployed to Germany. In Germany, went to Kosovo. and flew along the Serbian border doing reconnaissance patrols.
For me, one of the areas that wearing definitely helped me, I never ever would have had the confidence to travel on my own abroad.
I felt very strongly about going to a place that a liberal arts college that had a little of everything. I wanted to meet students who were studying something besides art.
When we were supposed to go to Angers, it was September 11th, the year of September 11th, and our trip to Angers got canceled. And so we went to Martinique instead. And I remember being on the plane to Martinique and saying, this is it. This is where my traveling life begins. And this is where, I'm going to get to see it. This is the beginning of where I'm going to get to see the whole world.
Oh, I was an English teacher in South Korea.
And Tim Backlund, I did an Endterm with him in 9th grade that sort of set me on a career trajectory. He sort of opened up my eyes to film and film editing.
I would say that I definitely did more homework at Waring than I did in college. So lots of homework for sure.
This is my first job after college. I guess I was on like a short-term digital history grant over the summer. And so my first job is now, and I am the exhibits assistant at the Museum of Science.
So now I am an epidemiologist at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. So, and I work in the Pulmonary and Critical Care Division of the School of Medicine.
Right now, I'm a captain in the United States Army.
And actually, now that I have my own kid and another one, I'm thinking more about kind of what I want to provide in terms of education, and it's the things I would be looking for are the things that Waring offered me.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like what my family's done and like who I'm married to, it's just like it's impossible that I am not super Waring oriented. Like all of my best friends are from Waring. My brother went there, my mom worked there, wife went there, wife's sister went there.
I mean, it's a little different for me because even before Waring existed, it was just like in the house, in my parents' house. So I was drawing probably since the age of 4 and, speaking French, of course, and writing in my journal and playing music. So those were the things that were always there.
And then also French I use all the time. I just recently translated a French play by Molière that was performed here at Yale. So in that way, and that's a very direct way in which the skills that I developed at Waring I continue to use in my life.
I think Waring really encourages you to like follow your passion regardless of how much money you're gonna make. I don't think that was the most elegant way of phrasing it, but I at least in college, I feel like I wasn't exposed to this as much at Waring, but in college I met a lot of kids who were kind of just studying something because they knew that they were going to make a lot of money by doing it, and I think that Waring kind of encourages you to do the opposite.
But traveling with Waring is an excellent exercise in giving over to whatever the universe is going to bring you in a way that I think is really magical and a really important skill. And super fun while you're doing it, even though sometimes you're hungry and tired and you've been walking all day. But like, when the end of the day, you've just like had so many encounters. And those encounters are like both physical and with real people and with your peers and with texts and with art objects. It's just, you've encountered so much because it's like a different way of being.
Definitely. It's kind of like forced bonding, like when you're in a place where you don't necessarily speak the language or don't really know your way around, and you're with 25 other people who are in the same situation. You like really bond and get to know each other. And
so when I graduated, I started to teach at Salem High School, and I taught 9th grade literacy and 10th grade English. I think a lot about how could I make schools more like Waring.
So I think one of the big components of Waring that stayed with me is the creativity portion. I mean, they focus so much on the arts, all the arts classes, the drama classes, music, everything like that. I think while directly it doesn't apply to my job, I mean, I'm not doing a whole lot of art per se in the military, but I think some of the creative tools that you learn from some of those definitely apply to the outside world in any capacity.
I think that if I hadn't been at Waring, where you have to learn to speak up in rooms where, even when you don't want to, I might not speak as much as I do. I think learning to have the courage to say uncomfortable things in rooms with lots of people is something that Waring taught me. And
No, it's definitely skills that can be used no matter which direction you turn. And whatever path you end up going down in college and then in life after college, that the ability to speak and communicate and listen and interact with people and put your feelings and thoughts down on paper are just such important skills that so few people have. It's unbelievable. It's having hired a lot of people over many years. It's remarkable how few people can do those things, and they graduate from good colleges. They go to good high schools. They're brought up in educational environments that most people, I think, would be very happy to put their kids in, and yet none of those things get translated out into the end product of a person. So
We all got on this bus. We threw our bikes on top of the bus, and off we were. My parents took all these kids for 3 months, and we had such a good time. And it's probably not only it probably isn't my favorite experience of Waring, but it's probably like my favorite life experience. If I could just pick like one time in my life that I would want to hold on to and forget about everything else, it would be that.
And Waring still I hold up as the ideal for like how you should approach an education and how you should approach school.
And when I look at the buildings, they've all changed, but they still retain some of their character, and I really appreciate being able to come through. Kai and I were talking about this before, and just being able to see this ghost of, what was there, a caricature or some film of what it was before, and I really like that.
Even though things have grown and there are new buildings and there's a lawn here that used to be a knoll, but it's nice that there's still some of the same trees and some of the same nooks, and the rocks aren't moving. It's great. I mean, like you said, personal rocks that I used to lie on and read.
But at the same time, thank God they've changed. Right? Thank God they have. This is what we were talking about, the three of us just earlier, about things changing and things moving on, because schools have to change, right? They are living institutions, they're breathing, they all reflect who you are. All of you are different from who we were, and so the school is different every year, right? And so thank God it looks different and it's being changed constantly. And how do you marry needing to constantly reinvent yourself while also maintaining who you are? And I think Waring has always thought about that and always tried hard to do that. Seems pretty successful. Yeah, but you should not be afraid of
Changing and evolving.
There's nothing, I mean, I love being able to come here and say pretty confidently, and I think you feel this way too, that we're looking around and we're like, okay, it's changed and yet it's the same.
Yep. Yeah, there's no more fabric on those walls, and that piece of furniture is gone. But I mean, now it's bigger and more open,
And those are just the physical changes, but I'm sure there are other changes too. I mean, you heard us talk about the limitations of the curriculum or how things were taught, and thank God that's changed too. I mean, those are important changes, and what I hope for Waring as it continues to grow and change, as it must to survive and be who it really is, right? I mean, Waring is a school that's all about change and about self-discovery, is that it's never afraid. You just can't be afraid. You can't try to hold on to something that's not there, because the second you try to hold on to keep something that was the same, you've killed it and you've lost it. So you have to constantly claim it and say it and be it.
But the myth was that it was a function of the size that made Waring as good as it was. And I don't think that's true. I do think there's something to be said for having a school that is, by and large, or on average, smaller than other ones, but I don't think it matters if you go above a certain metric. I don't think that makes any difference.
Yeah, actually, I've read a few articles where they say that, like, a good natural size of a group of people to all do something together is about 150, because that's a good that's a good amount of people so that they all sort of know each other, you know, and that you know, tribes of that size are very stable. So yeah, I did like it. I mean, I didn't know all that stuff then, but I did like the size of the school at that time.